One championship, 8 races, legendary circuits, drivers from all over the world, one family, one passion, endurance racing. Welcome to the most professional endurance racing series for all drivers, amateurs, semi-professional and professional. Welcome to the 24-hour series powered by Hankook. Round 1, the Hankook 24 Hours of Dubai. Round 2, the Hankook 12 Hours of Mugello. Round 3, the Hankook 12 Hours of Circuit Paul Ricard. Round 4, Hankook 12 Hours of the Hockenheim Route. Round 5, Hankook 24 Hours of Portimao. Round 6, the Hankook 24 Hours of Barcelona for the Trofeo Fermi Valer. Round 7, the Coppa Florio for the Hankook 12 Hours of Sicily. Round 8, the Hankook 24 Hours of Sebring. Can you beat the challenge of 8 endurance races? Will you become the 24-hour series champion for 2021? This is endurance. Call your racing friends and register now.
Four weeks on from the 12 Hours of Mugello, the 24H Series Circus has arrived in the paddock at Circuit Paul Ricard. What an undertaking that is in the current situation, and delighted to say that a very decent lineup indeed about to get prepared for tomorrow's race, but standing in their way before that is for each of the two classes, TCE and GT, 2 30-minute sessions. And then we have the enjoyment of night practice tonight as well, all brought to you live, courtesy of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. My name's Johnny Palmer. We'll be hearing very shortly from the rest of the team in a second. But as I mentioned, we're 4 weeks on from the first round of the European Championship. But remember back to January, when the international part of the 24H Series began in Dubai for the traditional season start, the 24 hours over the weekend of the 14th, 15th and 16th of January. Then we went to Tuscany for the 12 hours of Mugello, split across 2 days, unlike this weekend at RICARD, which is 12 hours in one go, tomorrow morning from 10 o'clock. Then in May, we head to Hockenheim for another 12-hour split race. 2 back-to-back 24-hour races follow in Portimao and in Barcelona in July and September, respectively. It'll be a second visit to Sicily for the Coppa Florio 12 Hours of Sicily at the start of October. And then the second big flyaway event of the season ends the campaign at Sebring on the concrete for a 24-hour race in November. So that is the calendar set nicely out. And before we bring Joe Bradley in, who'll be joining me for commentary duties for the next 2 30-minute sessions, let's get a flavour of how things are in the pit lane with Lukas Gajewski, our man in the pits for the weekend.
Well, it's a great flavor. Thank you very much, Johnny. It's absolutely fabulous down here at Circuit Paul Ricard. It's actually picnic weather here. I found myself a bit of cheese and a bit of salami, which actually might start walking in a minute, but that's what I'll do as well to report from the pit lane. Talking points? Well, certainly the weather. It is not as hot as it has been in earlier years, in previous years at Circuit Paul Ricard, but still around 20 degrees, blue skies, couple of clouds, but most importantly, sunshine. So brilliant conditions for qualifying. Traffic? Don't think it's going to be too much of a worry because, especially for the first TCE bit, it's 8 cars. sharing 5.8 whatever kilometers. So that's all right. Might be a bit more later on for the GT part of qualifying, but I think traffic isn't too much of a worry. I think it's going to be a lot of strategy even already in qualifying, because although we are back at Paul Ricard for the 4th time in history with Creventic, it's a new format. It's a proper 12-hour race again, and that means there is some homework to be done for the teams, even though it's only practice Friday.
You make a very good point there, Lucas. I was looking this up actually prior to coming on air. This will be the first ever all the way through 12 hours of Paul Ricard. Previously, when we visited this circuit, which was in 2015, 16 and 17, they were all 24-hour races, and in very much the traditional sense, all the way through the night. Now, if you go back through the archives, I reckon I found one other 12 hours of Paul Ricard, which was in 1971 for the European Touring Car Championship, but that was held as 2 6-hour races, as a heat on the Saturday and a heat on the Sunday, and then they added together the times to produce the 12 hours of Ricard. So this will be the first ever where we're running from 10 o'clock tomorrow through till 10 o'clock in the evening. A bit of history being made, not only for the 24H series, but also for the venue as well. So Lucas looking after stories that emerge during the next 30-minute TCE session, and after half an hour's pause, we will then crank up for 17 cars taking to the track for the GT series part of the qualifying. That will determine our grid for tomorrow, of course, but then there are 2 hours of night practice starting at 8 o'clock tonight local through till 10 o'clock, because a fair chunk of this race, well, perhaps less so than before the clocks changed, but a fair chunk of the race nevertheless will be held in nighttime conditions, so we need to get everybody used to that. Clock started to tick down. As I say, my name's Johnny Palmer. You're listening to the Radio Show Limited network of channels. I'm delighted to say that for the rest of today and all of tomorrow, I'm going to be joined by Joe Bradley.
Hey Johnny, hey Lucas, hello everybody. Great to be at Paul Ricard, isn't it? And you know what, maybe we're revisiting that bit of 1971 by kicking off with the qualifying session for our TCE runners. 6 TCR classes, 2 cars in the TCX class, and yes, we might have 30 minutes maybe, but that 30 minutes will fly by here at Paul Ricard. Relatively long lap, and I've got to say, it might be Lucas who's making a lot of pit stops if he chooses to eat that salami. I'd be a bit dubious about that, mate.
He didn't sound particularly confident about taking that on board, even this early on in the day, bearing in mind he's going to be busy till at least 10 o'clock tonight. So the number 1 Autorama Motorsport Volkswagen Golf has headed out fairly early on in the session. Now, this car in free practice earlier today, which was held, by the way, for an hour and a half, from 12 o'clock this afternoon, that car, I think I'm right in saying, was the fastest TCE machine of the session. Yes, because behind it, the GT4 leader, fastest car from ST Racing, which is the BMW M4 GT4, but the fastest of the TCRs was the number 1 car. So that's definitely going to be one to look out for during this session. It was Emil Heyerdahl who did the quickest time in that machine. But to be honest, the rest of the crew in the number 1 look very strong. However, though, Joe, to this point, it's not really been Autorama's season, has it? They've had bad luck at both Dubai and Mugello, so time for that to change. Yeah,
they are deserving of a little bit of good fortune. Problems in the lead up to the Dubai 24 hours saw them having to re-shell one of those cars overnight. In fact, getting the shell from the local Volkswagen dealer in downtown Dubai. And a similar problem with a huge shunt at Mugello, which ripped the full engine and gearbox out the front of the car. And I think that was the 112 car that occurred to in that team.
Yeah.
But that put the car out for the rest of the weekend, didn't take any part. They've had a bit of an up and down start to 2021, so if the luck gods are watching and looking down upon the Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power team, I think they need to be dishing them a better hand of cards.
No, I would agree with that. 4 drivers actually labelled against the number 1. So there's been a late addition there, and that will be Yannick Mettler, who I think on initial entry list wasn't there, but he's the semi-pro in the combination, together with Konstantin Kletzer, who's also semi-pro, Emil Heyerdahl, who's an AM, but proved himself to be very quick in pre-practice, and Jerome Oge makes up the 4-driver lineup. Let's run you through the other drivers for the first phase of qualifying, the 108 Cupra Leon Competition, which is entered by RC2 junior team by Cabra Racing. That's Ruben Fernandez, the Spaniard, taking duties in qualifying, at least initially. There's always the option to cycle through one or two drivers, of course. Marlon Menden, who's started the other Autorama by Wolf Power Volkswagen Golf, that is car 112. Mathieu Detry, looks like he went out and came back in again in the AC Motorsport Audi RS3. On an outlap is Guillaume Roman, Frenchman, as part of the Nordschleifer Racing Ligier JS2R entry. You got Jorge Belloc Ruiz, another Spaniard who races for Tic Tap Totcar Sport, and they have a Cupra TCR. We haven't yet seen any action from the CWS Engineering Ginetta G55 as the Ligier JS2R heads into turns 3, 4 and 5, Joe. Now, I was calling a couple of races for these cars, about 6 or 7 of them as part of the Ligier European Series last weekend at Barcelona. I don't think this is the first time we've seen one of these JS2Rs. Look very, very smart. There's no street car equivalent, but, I mean, you can sort of see where the design has come from. A mixture of lots of different GT cars there.
Yeah, I think they kicked off a one-make series in France, didn't they? And then along came the pandemic, and it kind of hasn't really gotten traction. And the same could be said for Creventic when they had this car on display, and I think this car has been entered by Nordschleifer Racing last season. They haven't really had a chance to gain traction and really perhaps showcase the car for this kind of endurance kind of race. And looking at the car, it looks a great package, tube frame with the bodywork over. It's a little sports racer car that's in the TCX class, and it's kind of perfect for this kind of endurance race, and perfect for the kind of customer race team that they're aiming for.
So qualifying continues at pace. The top 3 is Marlon Menden for Autorama Motorsport, Emil Heyerdahl second for the same team, and in third position Ruben Fernandez in the 108 Cupra Leon Competition. The fastest time, a 2:19.614 from Marlon Menden in the 112, as we head for the pits and to Lucas.
Yes, and I'm with Autorama Racing, especially with Yannick Mettler. Yannick, welcome back not only to the 24-hour series, but to TCR cars as well.
Yes, great to be back. It's very nice here in Paul Ricard, great weather, great to come to the south of France, and ready for qualifying, ready to send it.
Tell our listeners and viewers back at home around the world what you have been doing in the meantime after TCR.
After Dubai, basically we had the first GT3 race last week in the Monza, in the GT World Challenge. So yeah, obviously quite a big change, swapping between the cars. But yeah, I got some time yesterday in the practice to get used again, and so looking forward to the TCR.
And you'll spend a lot of time in the cars, I guess, because you're doing both cars here.
Yes, I'm sort of helping both cars out a little bit. So I'm doing the quali on number 112 after, and then in the race we see, depending on the situation, I will jump in.
Expectations for the remainder of the qualifying now?
Well, I think it's going to be tight as usual in this class, which is really nice. Obviously, I'm pushing to be in the front, but yeah, we'll see where we end up.
Best of luck. Thank you very much, Yannick. Back to you guys.
Yeah, so Yannick obviously splitting his duties, but focusing by the sounds of things on the number 1 car when we get to the race. That car displaying the number 2 on, well, the race number 1. The positional light in the rear window says 2. And I think that is actually old information now. The positional light's very, very useful as soon as the cars cross the line. But of course, if someone immediately behind goes quicker, then the data can change. So Emil Heyerdahl actually timed as the fastest car currently at 2:18.086, with the 112 car 1.5 seconds slower in the hands of Marlon Menden, who was quickest. And then you've got Jorge Belloc Ruiz for the Cupra TCR crew, and the other Cupra in the field, unfortunately there are actually 3, but the Cupra Leon from RC2 junior team by Cabra Racing now goes quickest, with Ruben Fernandez finding a 2:17.5, which is nearly 0.6 of a second faster than either of the 2 Golfs behind. So that's shaking things up nicely, Joe. We've had nearly 10 minutes of the session, but there are a number of cars I'm spotting already capable of pole position.
Yeah, it's going to be a fist fight, isn't it? And it's going to be a 12-hour fist fight tomorrow. And once again, we ask the question: just how important is qualifying? And certainly for a field of this size, perhaps not. It's bragging rights, isn't it? Everybody will want to optimise what they're doing this afternoon. And talking of optimisation, I'm intrigued as to why Colin White has waited 10 minutes to bring out the 278 Ginetta. It might be tactics. He's not wanting to maybe overstress the car, and he'll go out, he'll get the job done. And another car way down the order, Colin White on an out lap, by the way, and another car that is yet to show its cards. Rick Breukers in the 101 went out, came straight back into the pits, and that might be a one for Lucas to go and explore and make some inquiries as to whether that's a problem that's brought that car in with Rick Breukers.
One of the two Golfs heads to the pits. That's the 112, and the laborious task of getting the wheels off via 5 studs rather than the centrally mounted ones that you get on most of the GT cars. So got to be patient. That process can't be rushed because it's very easy to make a fumble when the pit stop is happening for real, if you like, during the race itself. So Paul Ricard, 5.8 kilometres in length, and we are using the chicane on the Mistral straight as well, so that is an opportunity for some overtaking potentially if you're right on the boot lid, particularly in the TCEs. The chicane that goes, there's plenty of them, by the way, partway down the Mistral straight, different combinations that you can use on this former, well, and sort of still current high-tech test track, but there was a while when lower profile meetings were held here and it tended to be ignored by the bigger championships, but it is now back on the Formula One calendar, and that chicane probably about between a third and a halfway down the Mistral straight, where you turn left, right, and then blend back in to the Mistral straight. You're still heading into senior corner at the end of that straight rather rapidly. That is labelled as turn 8, by the way, but the start of the lap's pretty sort of technical, Joe, especially turns 3, 4 and 5. You've got to get those right, and the flow through 6, all crucial to a good lap time.
It's an extremely technical track, Johnny, and it's the sort of track where you've got to be thinking about 2 corners ahead of where you are on the track, because there's a lot of compromise with the way that these corners blend into one another, and especially that sequence of corners in the early part of the lap that then eventually lead onto the Mistral, all important top speed down the Mistral into that chicane. Always a potential braking area if you're brave enough to go down the inside. It's a very, very tight entry into that chicane off the Mistral, but the rest of the track, it's this beautiful flow of corners, and of course I think it's probably correct of us to talk about the runoffs here. Completely unique, insofar as no gravel, all tarmac with different grades of track surface. And I remember we had a walk around a few years ago and just scuffing our trainer on those off-track parts. The surface of the tarmac when you go off track is very, very rough, and the further you get off track, the rougher it gets. And you cannot use those cut-throughs, if you like, those shortcuts, even though they look very, very inviting. It is tarmac, so you think, why not? Well, I'll tell you why not. Because if you go off track here, you're going to absolutely obliterate the surface of your tyre, and it's going to render that tyre useless for about 5 or 6 laps. And that's the whole point. So it's a really fantastic modern facility, and I think those tarmac areas with the different grades of surface were put in when the track was used purely for testing, wasn't it? There was a big break.
That's right.
in the use of this track, and it was a test track, and that was when this was put down. And since we've come back to race here, French Grand Prix here, of course, as well as some big endurance sports car racing, like ELMS. Was that a week ago, 2 weeks ago, JP?
That's still to come here at RICARD. We were in Barcelona last weekend.
It was Barcelona, wasn't it? Yes, of course.
It's become the June date because Le Mans has now moved to August, of course, and significant knock-on effect to various other meetings because of that. Let's focus on the 101 car. Rick Breukers at the wheel of that. Absolute best through the first sector on this lap. He's up to 3rd position, so let's head for their part of the pit lane with Lucas.
Yes, and with Luke Breukers, who might be able to explain us why the car got back to the pits after just 1 lap in this qualifying. Luke, tell us.
Yeah, so with the TCR car we have the front wheel driven car. So what we do is we drive one lap and we heat up the front tires. Then we switch those to the back. So the back is more stable to go fast quickly. And this way we have a stable car.
And now I think Rick is on a very good one. Are you actually calculating to score pole position today? Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, I've already seen some purple sectors, so he's doing a great job. And let's see what he can do.
Best of luck. Thank you very much, Luke, and back to you guys.
So it's good to have Luke in the lineup, Joe. Trying to remember whether he took part in the 24 hours race at Dubai. No, according to my records, he didn't. So this will be his first race, certainly within the 24H series this season. It was Rick and Ivo, son and father, racing at Mugello, but 3 brokers in the 101 this time around.
Of course, makes great sense, and I'm glad to hear that that's all it was. Having ran front-wheel drive cars myself, it's common practice to switch the tyres in a qualifying session, and we used to diagonal them. So you'd start off with the car running the right rear on the left front, and the left rear on the right front. Do a couple of laps, heat those tyres up on the front, which is much easier than heating the tyre up on the. You'd wait all day for the rear tyres to heat up if you went out like that. So you speed that process. So now that 101 car is on a very optimized set of tyres with all 4 corners up to temperature, and that's a common tactic to employ when you're running up front with.
Yeah. So the 101 car doesn't remain third. It has been beaten by a couple of cars now, so puts it down into 5th place, and Rick in the fueling area. We will describe as closely as we can the route through the fueling area, which is pretty complex, but Creventic, the organisers of the 24H series, have issued a map, and it's almost that complicated. I think drivers will have to have the map in the cockpit with them glued to the dashboard to remember exactly which direction to go. Mathieu Detry, the Belgian driver who races for Belgian outfit AC Motorsport in the 188 car, is fastest, with Jorge Belloc Ruiz also in the pits, but second quickest. And there's only a quarter of a second between those 2 cars now. And Yannick Mettler has found another 0.120 of a second to go quicker than the 2 of them. So Mettler for Autorama Motorsport, Mathieu Detry AC Motorsport, and the Tic-Tac Top Car Sport car of Jorge Belloc Ruiz, kind of helpless a little bit, sitting in the pits and watching his car slip back to the 2nd row. Now, Joe, the 101 car is working its way around this maze which gets you in and out of the fueling area.
Yeah, I was just about to mention, Johnny, it's kind of like you visit the whole paddock, don't you? You come in off the track, you go all the way to on the extremities of the paddock behind the pits, and then make your way round from the fueling area back round onto pit lane at pretty much the point where you come in. It's all the pit in end of the pit lane. So having done so the fueling comes first is perhaps what I'm trying to say, rather than last. So in this race, we'll see the cars come into the pits, and we'll see them probably, I'm talking about during the race, we'll see them invariably pull off and to go into fueling. This becomes a little bit complicated when you've got damage and the like, where you then have to go into refueling carrying the damage, or do you just forget that and get straight to the pit garage and get that whatever it is fixed?
Yeah, but it's an issue to be thought about at the tracks we visit where the fueling is before the pit lane, as you say, rather than visiting the crews first. We haven't, I realise, explained at length, if you're new to Creventic racing, why that is done. It's partly to do with safety. It also means that the very exercise of getting fueling to every single pit garage doesn't have to be done. So it is easier to just land the fueling area in a quadrant somewhere else in the paddock and allow everyone to drive to it and back again. But what you do need is at least one member of your pit crew located at the fueling pumps, and they're pistol grip pumps, the same you might find in your local supermarket. He or she needs to be in position well in advance, guiding the car to the correct pump. And we also, Joe, in the past had problems or variances between the fuel flow of the different pumps. Some were better than others, but there is this new thing now where you slot in your fuel flow meter. So I think that pretty much should eliminate the problem of old, and all of the pumps will be the same. But you need to make sure that you're fitting in the correct fuel flow meter according to your class.
Yeah, and in previous years, you would have had that. That was always a sign of good preparation for your team manager to take the refueler down to the fuel pumps and literally time the calibration of the amount of fuel being delivered by each individual pump. And I think that's why the series has brought that in to try and negate the disparity of that situation. And sometimes you haven't got a choice, Johnny. You've got to go to an available pump and get your fuel, or else, you know, you'd have everyone queuing up for the fastest pump, which is kind of a bit silly, really, if you're going to spend more time waiting for the faster pump. And there's you know, when you're talking about a few seconds, and that's all we're talking about, maybe not even that, you know, but in the heat of battle, it's all about shaving those tenths of second. And talking about shaving those tenths of second, we're already into the final third of this qualifying session.
And Yannick Mettler's getting a real hustle on. He was almost backing the Golf in to turn 3, four-wheel drifting the 112 machine. So we've already heard from Yannick chatting to Lukas Gajewski in the pits. He's now strapped himself into the 112. And the 31-year-old Swiss, who took a win in last season's International GT Open. So he's a full-out pro, although labelled as a semi-pro on the entry list. And really charging hard, as is the number 1 car now of Emil Heyerdahl. So Mettler has got 3.5 tenths to find on Mathieu Detry. So it's AC Motorsport back to the top of the times of this 8-car entry, a 2:15.868. But as I say, only leaning on a 3.5 tenth advantage over Yannick Mettler. Felipe Fernandez, another Spanish driver who's entered as part of the RC2 junior team with their Cupra Leon. He's currently 3rd, ahead of Jorge Belloc Ruiz and the Emil Heyerdahl car. In TCX, fastest car in that category is Colin White. He was late to the party, but the Ginetta G55, that familiar car from CWS Engineering, has just done a 2:16.646 to put it 6th place in the TCEs and leading his class, which is at TCX, a division basically for cars that are outside of the TCR regulations.
Are the 101 team lulling us into a sense of security here? They're way down in 6th in TCR, 7th overall, and Rick Breukers now on another outlap. We heard from his teammate Luke Breukers that they were coming in and swapping the tyres around to maximise the temp, the operating temperature in the pressure, I should say, in the rears. Rick's now been back into fueling as he then sort of regulated the fuel that he needs for his proper run. And with 7 minutes remaining in this qualifying session, Rick Breukers on an outlap. Let's keep an eye on him, I'd say, JP, because he might be about to set things on fire here.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I just fear, you know, not being up there during the bulk of the session, is that going to detract in any way? Rick is certainly capable of just going out and hitting his markers and probably finding a high 2:15, which will certainly put him into the ballpark. There's one car actually sub 2:16 at the moment. That is Mathieu Detry for AC Motorsport, and the car is still running. So with 6.5 minutes left on the clock, plus any extra you might be able to squeeze out of the session, depending on where you are when the checkered flag is displayed. If you've started a fast lap, you will be permitted to finish it. And over the line now goes Rick Breukers. So this is going to be something special. You sense they've spent the best part of 25 minutes getting the car in the sweet spot, getting the tyres up to temperature on all 4 corners. And let's see whether this is a marker to get him onto the front 2 rows, let's say, and then he can really push for the final couple of minutes with the insurance policy in hand and try and snatch pole.
He needs to find a second for that pole position. His quickest lap so far, 2:16.8, and the Audi of AC Motorsport, 2:15.8 is the full time. Yannick Mettler has beaten it, literally by hundredths of a second. Pole position time now 2:15.801. Yannick Mettler in the 112 Volkswagen goes to the top of the screen. He's beat that time of 2:15.868. Only 7 thousandths of a second in that, JP.
Just looking back to the times from Mugello, and it was a Breukers pole position 4 weeks ago for the 101. Ivo and Rick racing together on that occasion. It will have been a Rick time, so can he get back-to-back pole positions? Yannick Mettler standing in his way by 67 thousandths of a second over Mathieu Detry, Felipe Fernandez, Emil Hayadal, Ruiz, and now Colin White back out again. So he came into the pits possibly for a fresh set of Hankook tyres and then rejoined as the 108, the brand new car for the Cupra Leon Competition of RC2 junior team by Cabra Racing. This car raced at Mugello as well and looks very striking indeed, particularly in the sort of yellow and orange mix, and the stripe on the nose, the black stripe front to rear of the bonnet, looking, it's very striking, as I say, indeed. And the 108 car is running in 4th position with Felipe Fernandez, probably like to stay now as the qualifying driver. See whether he's got a bit more to find on this current set of tyres. Rick Broikers has been through, hasn't he, Joe? So that was improvement, a 2:16.218. It's only 6 thousandths of a second slower than the Cupra Leon, but it's only putting Rick 5th. And he wants to be, well, as I say, front 2 rows ideally, and to be honest, going quicker than Detry to be at least alongside Yannick Mettler.
And all 3 sectors for the 101 car lit up green, so they were personal bests in every sectors. I think there's more time to come from Rick Broik because he's going to go quicker this lap, no doubt about it. Might be poignant while we were talking about the 108 as well, Johnny, that that car is carrying 5 kilograms more than the other Cupras. The other 2 Cupras running at 1240. That 108, because it's a newer car, I believe, is running to 1245 kilograms. So 5 kilograms being given as a balance of performance on the 108.
Update from the pit lane from Lucas is that the reason for Colin White's brief pit stop was for tyre pressures rather than a new set of Hankook. So they're still just tweaking the setup, finding a bit of time here and there. His first sector on lap 7 for the 278 Ginetta is not an improvement though. Guillaume Romain is finding brilliant speed in that Ligier JS2R down the Mistral. He's just set the fastest middle sector of anybody, a 41.066. So the aerodynamics on that Ligier clearly far, far greater than the TCR field as Yannick Mettler has come in. Now, does he think that's enough? That's not a lot of time to be resting on, Joe, with 2.5 minutes to go. 67 thousandths between him and the second place car.
Well, the other thing is, Johnny, he's probably running a very low fuel amount in the tank. So he's come in, there's 2 minutes left. You haven't got time to put any more fuel in and have to go. So it is what it is, and yep. That's time. 2 minute 15.801 is Yannick Mettler's time. Now it's up to everyone else who's still on track to try and get near that.
That's a good point, because it's not a quick refuelling process here at RICARD, as we've described. And Mathieu Detry will have the same sort of problem. The AC Motorsport car comes in, not able to improve on the previous lap, so his best stands at a 2:15.868. So 2 cars now below the 2:16s. Still think Rick Broikers is capable of shaving a couple more tenths off his 2:16.218, but he's lost another position. That was after a good time for Jorge Belloc Ruiz in the 1-2-3 Tic-Tac Top Car Sport Cupra. 2:16.1 for Jorge puts him 4th, so the outside of the second row. And Rick Broikers, 1 minute and 20 to go. Looking to try and improve again, but a 38.3 is too slow for me. The Yannick Mettler and Mathieu Detry in laps were quicker than that. I think they're genuinely fighting a problem here, or maybe a couple of problems, Joe, at 101 Red Camel.
Yeah, I have to think the same, Johnny, because we're not used to seeing Rick Broikers running at the very back of the TCR field in any session. And again, I'd like to ask a probing question. Well, I'd like Lucas to ask a probing question as to just why that car is off the pace. I'm not sure. I think I mentioned earlier about how this track can really punish you if you go in certain sections of corners. If you push a little bit too hard, or maybe take a conventional line through a particular sequence of bends, it's not always the fastest way through that particular sequence of bends, because each corner compromises the next, and you only have to make a slight error, like, you know, turn in a metre or two too late, and you've compromised the whole lap. Now that's I'm not saying that's what Rick has done, because that would be very out of character, and he knows this place like the back of his hand. So I kind of err on the issue of maybe the car or the setup isn't performing as it should be, but that's not usually where we see that 101 Red Camel's car.
We may be overplaying this a little bit. It is only 0.4 of a second, so the pace is still sort of there, but when you're dealing with a class that is so close, he'd love to be closer to the sharp end. The checkered flag is out, and Yannick Mettler has pretty much cemented this pole position, because I'm looking at the other cars that remain out on track, none of them on for a time that will be better than a 2:15.801, and there are concerns about Emil Heyerdahl. He may have backed off deliberately so, but that number 1 car was definitely touring towards the end of the lap back to pit lane, and it just stopped out on the racetrack. So I did think there was a concern there. That might be fuel, I suppose, Joe. You're talking about Yannick Mettler running it very, very low. They're probably doing the same with the sister machine.
Yeah, I would think so, and certainly no apparent signs like smoke billowing from places on the car, steam or anything. He certainly hasn't gone off, and maybe that's why he was taking it so easy. Maybe he just, pushed that envelope with regards to weight. Weight costs time. You're moving that weight around in deceleration and acceleration, so it's you're optimizing your run by carrying as little fuel as necessary. And it's not uncommon to see a car pulling off to the side on an in lap at the end of a qualifying session. So I'd like to think that they can't possibly have another weekend of bad luck, JP.
No, surely not.
Can't.
Surely not. So the 18-year-old Emil Heyerdahl, who hails from Oslo in Norway, will have to walk back, or at least get a tow. It's looking slightly brighter. He did get 3rd position in the session, we should point out. So it's a 1-3 for Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power Racing. That's exactly where Lucas has headed to catch up with our poleman.
Yes, there is the number 1 on the TCR Golf with Yannick Mettler, who set the pole position time. Yannick, congratulations. That's quite a comeback to TCR, isn't it?
Thank you very much. Indeed, yes. It feels like we just talked 5 minutes ago. I don't know, it was all so quick and intense, but a lot of fun, obviously, and really happy. The car was amazing, and I could adapt well to the thank you to the TCR, and got a good lap in, and was enough for pole. So really happy about that.
But of course, that's only the qualifying bit. 12 hours now to come for you even on 2 cars. What will be key for the race, and which homework still needs to be done tonight in night practice?
Yeah, as you say, it's probably not the most important to start in the front now in a 12-hour race, but it's always nice, obviously, to have a clear view. I think for the race, the key will be to look after the material. There's quite some harsh curbs here, and we saw that yesterday in the practice, that things can break quickly, so I think we will hold a bit more back in the race.
And I understand the sister car, number 1, stopped on track. Do you have any news on that?
Low on fuel.
Right. Okay, there you go, guys. That's our pole sitter, Yannick Mettler, P1 at his TCR comeback here at Le Castellet.
And Yannick not overly concerned about the fact that Emil Heyerdahl will have a fairly long walk or winch back again, possibly all part of the strategy to eke as much fuel out of a very light tank as they could. So the 112 Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power Racing Golf GTI gets the pole position at 2:15.801, and obviously Yannick Mettler setting the time from the 188 AC Motorsport Audi RS3 for the Belgian squad and Belgian driver Mathieu Detry setting the time 2:15.868. 3rd position Emil Heyerdahl, the other Autorama Volkswagen Golf, the time at 2:16.079 from Jorge Belloc Ruiz's 2:16.1 for the Cupra TCR of Tic Tac Top Car Sport. 5th position for Felipe Fernandez, the 108 of the RC2 junior team by Cabra Racing Cupra Leon Competition. Rick Breukers in the 101 car 6th, 2:16.418 for Red Camel Jordans.nl, also in a Cupra. Colin White ended the session in the pits, but he'd already set the best time in TCX, 2:16.6 for the Ginetta G55 of CWS. And Guillaume Romain, despite his blistering pace in the middle sector of one of his laps, the 2:26 Nordschleifer Racing Ligier JS2R, finishes in 8th position, and it'll be a fight certainly between Colin's car and Guillaume's throughout the course of the race. I think they'll find 1 or 2 others as well with similar pace to tackle as well. And we're going to go to redcameljordans.nl to try and find out whether there was a problem with the 101.
Yes, and I've actually just been disturbing the guys. You can see them over there with the laptop doing all the data. Rick P6 in qualifying, and we think there were some issues going on. Please tell us about your qualifying.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're struggling with the car all weekend. Not sure why. So yeah, P6 is not where we wanted to be. And they took away some lap times, but we were not doing track limits, so we're gonna just show them the proof right now. It's really frustrating when you put such a hard work. You know the rules. You cannot go over the white line with 4 wheels. As long as they are in contact with the white line, you don't do track limits. And then they take away laps while you were not doing it. So I don't understand.
All right, Rick, thank you very much. So a bit of an upset. I mean, now, of course, we need to check, is P6 down to the technical stuff or to the deleted lap times? I understand it's down to the deleted lap times, but we'll double check on that and let them do their work first of all.
Yeah, but Rick, not in a particularly happy mood there. It's rare, Joe, for him to be like that, but clearly very frustrated. And I guess we will never know the times that were taken away, but they'll have a record of them somewhere. And more importantly, they've got video evidence, they say, of them not breaching track limits.
Yes, I can completely understand. I mean, you know, you could see Rick had been working hard in that qualifying session, and when you piece together a fabulous lap time and you know yourself that you are conscious of track limits. Remember how much of an issue track limits became at Mugello. So they're very aware, all of our runners are very aware of track limits and the importance of that. So when you go out and you put that lap time in and you're pretty confident that you didn't exceed track limits, and then you still have, it's kind of, you're feeling injustice. And so that was what Rick was feeling there, and the team are going to explore that. They're going to investigate it along with the race officials, and we'll get some rectification. Perhaps as a driver, you know, maybe he did put his wheel an inch off. It's very rare that the stewards get it wrong. So
true.
Unfortunately for Nick, you know, for Rick, it might be that's where they're going to start. You know what? If I was them, and I'm pretty sure this is where they're going to be right now. That was qualifying. Forget it.
Yeah.
Let's think about the race.
Yeah, it's a 12-hour race to come, and sixth place is absolutely fine. We must remember that and not lose perspective necessarily. So that's the first 30-minute qualifying session done. There are GTs to come next, all 17 of them. Again, another 30-minute session. So join us for that on the Radio Show Limited network of channels. We'll return at 3:55 for the build-up.
One championship, 8 races, legendary circuits, drivers from all over the world, one family, one passion, endurance racing. Welcome to the most professional endurance racing series for all drivers, amateurs, semi-professional and professional. Welcome to the 24-hour series powered by Hankook. Round 1. The Hankook 24 Hours of Dubai. Round 2, the Hankook 12 Hours of Mugello. Round 3, the Hankook 12 Hours of Circuit Paul Ricard. Round 4, Hankook 12 Hours of the Hockenheim Route. Round 5, Hankook 24 Hours of Portimao. Round 6, the Hankook 24 Hours of Barcelona for the Trofeo Fermi Valer. Round 7, the Coppa Florio for the Hankook 12 Hours of Sicily. Round 8, the Hankook 24 Hours of Sebring. Can you beat the challenge of 8 endurance races? Will you become the 24-hour series champion for 2021? This is endurance. Call your racing friends and register now.